Hi, it's Steve the Grumpy Hypnotist. This is part two, or it might be part three, of a series, Snappy Answers to Hypnosis Questions. And in the previous part of the series, I think I might have mentioned, uh, referred to some resources for improving the quality of questions because that can make a big difference in, well, pretty much everything. Because questions, the nature of how they're framed and how they're set up can have a pretty big effect on just everything really, and they can kind of be productive or unproductively framed. This is a lot of these questions I'm just going through whatever shows up on Quora. Quora.com is a place where people can just go and post questions about lots of different topics. A lot of them are basically similar to each other, so but we'll go through here. Okay, one question here that shows up is what are the factors that motivate behavioral change in readiness to change? It's very relevant to hypnotic work because people see hypnotists wanting to make a change, particularly behavioral change. Motivation is an interesting aspect of this, though, because a lot of people, I think, even hypnotists, I believe, sometimes, believe that it's about motivation. Well, to answer this question directly, to begin with, what are the factors that motivate change? Uh, a big factor is simply how much pain someone is in, how much someone is suffering because of the current state of their behavior. If they're not really suffering from it uh, in a way that is painful enough, well, a lot of times they won't change or feel the need to. Of course, this runs into a problem where certain behaviors, it doesn't cause immediate pain, only causes pain like years down the road, or sometimes it causes pain the next morning. Certain habits and behaviors have the effect of like the next morning you suffer, like the whole weekend you suffer from trying to recover from some. I remember those days anyway. But anyway, so a lot of times with hypnosis, what involves there is kind of instilling the habit of like being able to project, looking forward to the future, so that if put something in place so that instead of going down the same path, put something in place so that you can kind of sense already what what suffering will be. It sounds terrible to put it that way, but yeah, pain is actually a good motivator. But at the same time, motivation is an interesting, I think, a red herring sometimes because people sometimes hope that a hypnotist or something is going to motivate them to change. That's not the same thing, you know. And personally, with the people that I work with, over thousands of people over, over a decade, I really do my best to avoid trying to motivate anyone because that's not my role. Like, if someone is not motivated to improve or to do something, it's their business. I don't really care. I'm not here to save them or heal them or do anything for them if they're not motivated to it. This is why I've always had the policy of not working with people who have been sent in by like family members or friends. Maybe, I mean, referrals are great. What I mean is where people have set up appointments for their spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, family member, setting up an appointment for them to see some hypnotist, and like this hypnotist will make you be healthier or something, do something for yourself. When that becomes clear that it's that sort of situation, that happens rarely these days. I try to make clear that people shouldn't even bother. But in a consultation, if it becomes clear that's the case, which again is not that common these days, but if it's clear, then we just end it because there's no point proceeding. We don't want to. Again, I don't think it's my role to motivate people in that way. They can do whatever they want. They're adults anyway. So, and this idea of motivation. Sometimes we look for when people are very adamant about, I want to change, I'm highly motivated, I'm very serious, it's something I'm very serious about. That is kind of a warning sign sometimes of the opposite, because people who are successful at change, they want to change, they have certain goals, they're clear about what needs to happen, what they want to happen, but very often they're not really having to put it on display, like being very. It's almost like you're trying to convince me, the hypnotist, or they're trying to convince themselves that they're serious. If they're serious, they're serious. They don't have to like announce it to everyone or to convince anyone really. So it means they're trying to convince themselves maybe. So that's actually a red flag if they're going overboard with that. Another question here on Quora is why can't I stand up for myself in social situations? Very common type of thing. Like, why can't I stand up for myself in social situations? Some of these questions are so simple, like probably because you're scared. You're afraid of what will happen if you stand up for yourself. Whether because of history, maybe if you stood up for yourself in the past, you got beaten down or something, or it didn't work out for you. Or maybe just naturally, just more the inhibited person, more like not less likely to stand up for yourself. But if you're naturally that way, it shouldn't really concern you. If you're naturally that way, if you're just more like compliant and like subservient type of thing. If that's how you are, that's fine. What's wrong with that? If that's naturally your tendency. But this kind of question, this kind of comes up from people who are disturbed by that or think that that means that's like a bad thing. But it's, why can't I stand up for myself in social situations? Yeah, it just means you're afraid, and so do something so that you're not afraid. Now, if you do something to stand up for yourself and you repeatedly get beaten up or beaten down or doesn't work out for you, that means you're probably doing it wrong. So just get better at doing it. Actually, this relates to this next. All these are kind of similar theme. How do you become confident and outspoken? You become confident and outspoken by repeatedly speaking up successfully. And again, on the same line, if you repeatedly speak out, and it doesn't cause the results or have the effect that you intended or were aiming for, that means, again, you're probably doing it wrong. You have to work on your skills to get better at speaking up. And if you do that over and over again, and you eventually learn how to do it successfully, then you'll become confident. But there's no way to become. I think a lot of these things are about like, how do I become confident so I can become outspoken? Which is completely backwards, because you shouldn't be confident about something if you have a track record of doing it well, successfully. Like, why would someone be confident about something that they haven't done and succeeded at? If you think about, confidence being the more like technical definition of it, it's there's no such confidence level is like how, based on our best estimate, observation, data, empirical evidence, experience, how confident can we that we can predict a certain result? So if you haven't had a history of certain results successfully, then yeah, there's no confidence level. Otherwise, that form of confidence is just like, I guess it's more about like, well, I don't know what it is really. It's just at a deeper level, though, that type of confidence can be this idea that no matter what, if you speak up, and if it does work out, or if it doesn't work out, even if it doesn't work out, so what? It's not going to kill you. Well, depending on the scenario, like if you're in some police state or something like that, But aside from that, just like regular social stuff, so what? Speak out, speak up, whatever. Get ostracized, fired, that kind of thing. Now that might sound terrible, but at a really deep level, if a certain type of confidence is that, well, all these things terrible, but I'll get through it. Like where there's like an invulnerability, no matter the external outcome, even like bad results. So that's a kind of different type of confidence, I think, more existential, philosophical. But again, this general tendency to think in terms of like this kind of question kind of really, is obviously framed like, how do I become confident and so I can be outspoken? It's like the opposite. Speak out first, then if you do well with it, then eventually be confident. In this era of social media, how do I stop comparing myself to others? Well, for one thing, there's all these behavioral things of like reducing exposure to social media. It's like the obvious answer, like don't have those things installed on your phone, that kind of thing. That's more like tactical type of thing. That's kind of easy to suggest, though. But how do you stop comparing yourself to others? For one thing, that's a silly goal because humans, by design, are designed to compare status, attractiveness, for certain people like wealth, material goods. Uh, there's a function of the brain that's built into everyone. It's a comparison, and everyone has different things that they value more than others in terms of like comparing myself to my good family man, father, husband, wife, whatever. Am I a good student? Am I a good business person? That kind of thing. So, for one thing, this kind of question is another example of like, how do I stop comparing myself to others? Stop doing that because that that's a form of weird way. It's also comparing yourself. You think other people aren't comparing themselves to each other. Everyone does. So, don't try to do things that you can't. Don't try to do things that are impossible, like stopping comparison. Now, if you're doing it a lot, if it's habitual, excessive, if that's preoccupying you, that's like a different thing, right? But if you accept that comparison function is natural, that's an important step in like not getting caught in that loop. Because if you try to stop comparing yourself, you'll do more of it. Because you'll think, I shouldn't be comparing myself as much as other people. Other people aren't comparing themselves. Well, they probably are. So if you accept that comparison is natural, normal, then that's like one of the first steps in like not comparing yourself to others. So anyway, and hypnosis can help break any type of habit or pattern of that kind of thing, loosening things up that way. Do you think it's always this is so weird. Do you think it's always better to take your decisions based on logic rather than emotions? No. Personally, I tend to be like a person like if something is illogical, if there's a train of argumentation that is not making sense or contradictory in some way, that drives me insane. So this is a weird example. Like when things are illogical to me, it actually kind of drives me nuts. So that's a weird thing actually. But the problem with the logic, though, I think people, I think it's a common thing, where people think that logic is a method of getting to the right answer. But but in fact, logic can lead to lots of different answers depending on how important certain values are to you as a person. So I think a lot of people fall into a trap, like an ineffective, immature way of thinking, like, well, there's one logical answer, and it's the answer I came up with. An example of this would be like an example of the different values that can lead to different factoring of different pathways in a logical decision tree type of thing. Is like, let's say, the classic example of like, okay, so someone has promised their child, little Bobby or something, to be at the soccer game this weekend or something, or to be at the playoffs, or to go to their school play or something. And they've also promised to get some project done at work or something. Now, there's no logical solution to that. Like, okay, well, it's obvious that they should go to the school play or the soccer game to be there for the kid because the child is so important to them. And there's no logical answer saying that, well, okay, the work project is much more important because without that, then this person's career will suffer and won't be able to support the kid as well, that kind of thing. People can answer that lots of different ways logically because everyone's different in terms of what they place value on in terms of weighted value. Like sometimes based on experience, the stage of life they're in, So there's no right or wrong answer to that, but people can give logical reasons in either direction. So this question, is it always better to take your decisions based on logic rather than emotions? Even this question is silly because it's either one or the other, but they can both be wrong. you could reach a bad decision with logic. You could reach a bad decision with emotion, so it's kind of stupid. You could reach a good decision with logic. You could reach a good decision with emotion. It essentially relates to kind of hypnosis, I think, because I think of hypnosis as like this whole left brain, right brain thing. I'm left-handed, so people left-handed people I think tend to be more conscious of that hemispheric division. I think this logic emotion, it's very stereotypical, like very cliche, but it is a simplified form of something that's actually true, I think, very simplified. like one left brain, right brain, whichever one is logical, sequential, versus another one more about feeling, emotion, blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of what we're doing with hypnosis is integrating the two, not necessarily synchronizing the two, but resolving conflicts between the two sides. And again, this question itself frames it so that there is a conflict, like it's one or the other, which is kind of, again, like silly. It's like half your brain, using half your brain instead of using both, right? Because not to be too morbid, but there are certain ways of logical thought that if you think about it historically, when people have followed things to a logical conclusion, have led to like historically things that were like not like good at all for people, and things that not just emotionally, but things that are really terrible. Because if people follow a certain train of thought that, well, this is efficient, logical, there's a problem, eliminate it. Sometimes certain people can be identified as problems. It can kind of really lead to like terrible things. So this idea is better one way or the other. I mean that in personal life too. Like if there's a certain type of cold logic that can result in like a lot of harm to people and society in general. And of course, emotionalism is can be annoying too, right? Because people can become more about feelings and what feels good immediately instead of thinking ahead to like second order effects and that kind of stuff. Lately I've been overthinking a lot of stuff. It makes me be more self-conscious and a lot more insecure. Do you know how to prevent this kind of feeling? No, actually, I'm not going to answer that. This is another one. I think this better. What's wrong with me? I'm an overthinker. I'm self-conscious. I feel alone. I have no motivation to do anything, and I can't sleep. This question is a classic example of the question itself is a problem, right? Like it starts off, what's wrong with me? Plus, the question itself contains the answer. This person is an overthinker. They think too much. They're self-conscious. They think too much about themselves. They're focused on themselves too much. They feel alone. They're alone. They have no motivation. They're probably waiting for someone to motivate them, or well, some motivation to magically happen or something, which is not going to happen. They can't sleep, probably because they're alone. They're thinking too much, and they feel stuck because they have no motivation. So the question itself, what's wrong with me? And then they come up with this string of the answers. So that's kind of a problem, right? Because if you spend all your time asking yourself questions and you have the answers already, and repeating the answers to yourself, that's kind of a waste of time. Like, if you're an overthinker, self-conscious, feel alone. Well, for example, if you feel alone, then obviously the simple answer is to do something about that. Like you could stay there being alone, feeling alone. That's not to mean there's anything wrong with you. It means you're a normal person if you feel alone. If you're alone, then you should feel alone. But it could also be the case, of course, that you're not actually alone, but you just feel alone. Well, if that's the case, then like change your perception to recognize that you actually aren't alone, and that if you feel alone, actually probably other people feel like you, all that kind of stuff. So this kind of question is an example. Sometimes we're going to break the habit of like getting stuck in a loop of like, what's wrong with me? I'm an overthinker. Even that's like a self-hypnosis thing. This whole idea of like self-hypnosis where you repeat to yourself very simple suggestions, getting better and better every day, getting better and better. I am healthy and happy. This person is probably spending a lot of time like, I'm an overthinker, something wrong with me, I'm self-conscious, blah, blah. So that's all they're doing. They're self-hypnotizing themselves. And a lot of what we do with hypnosis, I think, is breaking people out of this kind of self-fulfilling trance in some way. But yeah, we really want to break this habit of like, what's wrong with me? Because you know what's wrong with you. Like, stop asking yourself that. You can do something about it instead. So again, well, there's a lot of this type of questions on Quora. Really, but I really urge people again to take a look at the previous part to this series. snappy answers to hypnosis questions. Because in the description, and I might include in the description for this one too, like a link to a very simple guide you can get on Amazon, written by some actually respectable people, about a guide for asking effective questions, because that's really important. Because you can see probably from these examples, they can either be framed in ways that help you move forward, or they can be framed in ways that just kind of like repeat the problem over and over again for no reason. I mean, that's what some people want, right? They just want to dwell on some whatever repetitive way of thinking, hoping they get. Actually, I think the problem is some of these questions very clearly they're not meant to solve the problem. They're meant to commiserate. They're meant to seek comfort. Like, what's wrong with me? The classical thing is people, hoping people say like, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. You're great. You're wonderful. Blah blah. You're human." All this stuff. So I think that is, kind of like just seeking some comfort or commiserating with others and misery and stuff. And it's reinforcing that, I think. So the only thing, with hypnosis, we don't, at least my approach, I don't spend a lot of time telling people doing that kind of thing, because it's just reinforcing like a bad habit of like seeking comfort, validation, self-assurance, approval from someone. It's kind of pointless. So once again, it's Steve the Grumpy Hypnotist, and thanks. Bye.